In the final days of winter, beneath the glittering skyline of Beijing, a quiet terror begins to pulse beneath the city's polished surface, a shadowed world where rumors of disappearances, forced silence, and unspeakable power games whisper through the cold night air. The season should have felt peaceful. Snow clung to the pavement like a thin veil of purity, and the neon lights of luxury districts shimmered across empty sidewalks. Every evening, camera flashes still burst along red carpets, capturing perfect smiles and flawless gowns. Yet behind the immaculate facade, something colder than the winter wind crept through the cracks of the entertainment world. It started as faint murmurs, stray lines in anonymous chat rooms, strange voice notes forwarded at midnight, a few blurred images uploaded before vanishing again. At first, they were dismissed as the usual noise that haunted celebrity culture. But the tone of these whispers was different. Not petty scandal. Not industry gossip. It was fear. A kind of fear that spreads only when people begin to believe that someone, somewhere, has disappeared without explanation. Within private circles, insiders spoke in coded phrases, as if even naming the truth aloud might provoke consequences. They described a machinery deeper than public relations, more suffocating than contractual obligations. Something capable of erasing a person entirely, their presence, their voice, even their last trace of resistance. In a landscape where perfection is manufactured and silence is rewarded, the most unsettling thing of all was how naturally these possibilities fit into place. How easy it was to imagine a star vanishing into the night, leaving behind only a photo set scheduled for release or a pre-written statement crafted to keep questions at bay. And threaded through every rumor was a single name, a young actor whose career had only just begun to bloom before it was abruptly extinguished. There were official explanations, of course. There always are. But for those who paid attention, something about the narrative felt incomplete. Too tidy, too quiet. It was the kind of quiet that often hides the truth instead of revealing it. Online communities began piecing together what little they had, a strange expression in a live stream, an unsteady step on a stage, a fragment of dialogue recorded at a rap party. Each clue may have meant nothing on its own, yet when assembled side by side, they formed a silhouette, far darker than anyone expected. Beijing's winter nights suddenly felt heavier. Fans who once celebrated new drama, releases now scrolled through message boards filled with unease. Some believed the rumors were exaggerations. Others argued that they were not rumors at all, but signals, warnings that something larger was unfolding beneath the bright advertisements and billboard facades. Somewhere between the facts and the void, between silence and speculation, the story took on a life of its own. And it all began the moment a rising star vanished, leaving behind only silence, questions, and a trail of fear. The story of Yu Menglong had always seemed gentle, almost fragile, like the soft glow of a candle, sheltered between two palms. He was the kind of actor whose presence carried an unspoken calm, the sort of beauty that did not demand attention, but quietly pulled the gaze of anyone passing by. His rise in the industry had been steady rather than explosive, built on a collection of performances marked by sincerity rather than spectacle. To most people, he felt safe. A young star untouched by the sharp edges of fame, someone who seemed to float above the volatile storms of the entertainment world. Yet beneath that calm exterior were traces of something else, faint but unmistakable once you knew where to look. In the months leading up to his disappearance, attentive fans noticed subtle changes. A slight tremor in his voice during a live stream, as though he were trying to hide how tightly he was gripping the armrest beneath the camera frame. The short pauses between words that felt less like dramatic timing and more like someone checking their surroundings. Even the smile that had once appeared effortlessly now flickered on slower, like a light bulb struggling to keep its warmth. These were details easy to dismiss individually, but together they painted a portrait of a young man carrying a burden no one around him could truly see. There were whispers that he had become withdrawn backstage, avoiding long conversations, keeping his phone close to his chest at all times. Crew members shared that he often stepped away to take calls in secluded corners, returning with eyes that looked as though they had traveled somewhere far darker than his gentle expression would ever admit. Some chalked it up to exhaustion, a reasonable explanation in an industry that burned through youth like fuel. But exhaustion alone did not explain the bruises once seen beneath the collar of his costume, hastily covered by makeup artists who exchanged uneasy glances when they thought no one was watching. Officially, none of this existed. Officially, Yu Menglong was fine. But the silence in his eyes said otherwise. The night before he vanished, a small fan meeting was held. Cameras captured him waving, smiling, speaking warmly, yet there was a glassy tension in his gaze, as if he were searching faces in the crowd for someone who never arrived. When asked about future projects, he hesitated for a fraction too long. "There are decisions I need to make soon," he murmured, eyes drifting toward the floor. Life is unpredictable. It was the kind of vague, philosophical comment celebrities often made to sound introspective. But the tone in his voice made it feel like a confession. After that event, he retreated from the public eye. No schedules. No behind-the-scenes footage. No endorsements. Nothing at all. Days later, a statement appeared online, claiming he had suffered a health emergency. It was concise, overly sanitized, and strangely emotionless. Fans were told to respect his privacy. No further updates would be given. In other circumstances, such an announcement might have prompted prayers and well wishes. But this time it sparked dread. Too much had felt wrong before the disappearance. Too many pieces failed to fit the narrative of a simple health issue. Online forums erupted with speculation. Users began dissecting every piece of media they had saved over the past months. They slowed down videos frame by frame, enlarging screenshots to inspect details that might have gone unnoticed before. A particular clip drew attention. Yu Menglong stepping onto a stage wearing boots visibly too large for his build. They made his movements look heavy, uneven, as if each step required an effort beyond his usual grace. Theories emerged that the oversized boots concealed something, a tracking device, restraints, anything that might explain his rigid gait. Nothing was proven, yet the idea rooted itself in thousands of minds simply because it seemed too strange to ignore. Then came the photograph. A candid backstage shot taken by a stylist showed Yu Menglong in profile, his head slightly turned as though startled. The right side of his ear appeared oddly shaped, the curve of the cartilage subtly distorted. The photo was deleted minutes after posting, but not before someone saved it. Overnight, discussions began about whether this was the result of an injury, a failed cosmetic alteration, or something inflicted under circumstances unknown. Again, no answers, only questions that piled higher and higher until they felt suffocating. Rumors intensified when unverified accounts claimed he had been attempting to collect evidence about unnamed figures within the industry. Messages circulated describing a USB drive, a digital vault of audio files, photographs, and names, a collection he supposedly hoped would secure his freedom from an environment he no longer felt safe in. The more these stories spread, the more people began to wonder not whether they were true, but how much truth they contained. Even those who dismissed the more dramatic theories admitted that something, somewhere, had gone terribly wrong. The most disturbing whispers suggested he had been isolated before his disappearance, kept under a form of surveillance or control. Again, nothing could be confirmed, but the absence of clarity only deepened the fear. Silence often speaks louder than any official statement, and the silence surrounding Yu Menglong had begun to feel deafening. Then, almost as abruptly as the official notice had appeared, rumors arose about a sudden international trip made by a group loosely associated with his management. The timing aligned too neatly with the dates of his disappearance. People speculated that it was linked to his passing, that arrangements were being made discreetly, far from the scrutiny of domestic media. These theories surged across the internet, not because they were proven, but because so little had been explained. And, through all of this, a strange spiritual undertone began weaving into the narrative. Bloggers from overseas claimed to sense a presence, a plea, an echo that felt too heavy to be imagined. Dreams were shared. Unusual coincidences recorded. Whether one believed in such things or not, it was impossible to deny that a deep anguish seemed to hover over his absence, as though the world had lost something gentle without understanding how or why. But what terrified the public even more was the growing belief that Yu Menglong was not the only one, merely the first. Chen Duling had always embodied a kind of softness that seemed immune to the harshness of fame. In the world of bright lights and relentless ambition, she carried herself with the quiet composure of someone who preserved her sincerity, like a fragile artifact, untouched by the noise around her. For years, the public saw her as a gentle muse of coming-of-age cinema, the face of youth and tenderness. That was why, when murmurs began circulating about her unusual withdrawal from public life, unease settled over her fanbase like a thick fog. It began subtly. A cancelled photo shoot here, a postponed appearance there. At first, excuses flowed easily. Conflicts in scheduling, last-minute changes, fatigue due to tight filming cycles. But the pattern grew. Entire engagements disappeared from her calendar without explanation, as though someone had quietly swept her obligations off the table. What unsettled fans more than the cancellations themselves was the silence that followed. No behind-the-scenes posts, no spontaneous updates, no casual interactions on social media. Chen Duling, once so present and luminous, seemed to dim herself out of existence. Speculation ignited when messages claiming insider knowledge circulated in private forums. They hinted that her absence was not voluntary. These whispers, unverified and shapeless, suggested that she had been observed in the company of unfamiliar men near her residence. Not bodyguards hired for protection, but figures whose presence felt intrusive, not supportive. Videos taken by onlookers showed strangers lingering at a distance, communicating through earpieces, watching entrances and hallways with unsettling attentiveness. To some, the footage was easily dismissed. To others, it felt like the beginning of a story far darker than anyone wanted to believe. The tension deepened when past photos of her with Yu Menglong resurfaced, candid shots of two young actors laughing, their friendship genuine and unguarded. They had been close, closer than many had realized. With the growing online belief that Yu Menglong may have been carrying sensitive information before his death, a theory flourished. If he had entrusted anything to someone, it might have been her. The idea spread with frightening ease, propelled less by evidence and more by fear, by the chilling possibility that she knew something she was never meant to hold. Then came the date that haunted countless message boards, the 5th of December. It emerged in speculative discussions, tied to rumors about a powerful figure whose birthday allegedly carried ceremonial significance in certain political or spiritual circles. The claim was never supported by official documentation, yet it multiplied like wildfire. People insisted that the date marked a threshold, a moment when hidden forces demanded symbolic offerings. Even those who scoffed at such theories could not ignore the terror with which others spoke of it. And, at the center of this phantom ritual, they placed Chen Duling. Her name became a magnet for dread. Around this time, an entirely separate thread of narrative wove itself into her story, one spun from mystics abroad who claimed to receive visions unrelated to media speculation. These accounts described an isolated, desolate landscape, an abandoned quarry, a tunnel of cold stone, a figure in a numbered uniform standing motionless under a harsh industrial lamp. The number was 100. The figure, they insisted, was Chen Duling. The claim was impossible to verify, yet the imagery was so vivid, so disturbingly specific, that it embedded itself in the public imagination. Some dismissed it as spiritual theatrics. Others felt a coldness settle in their bones as they contemplated the possibility. Fear swelled to its peak when her sudden reappearance stunned the public. Without warning, she walked onto a red carpet, smiling, waving, luminous as ever. Flashbulbs erupted like a storm of fireflies around her. The press declared relief. Online articles celebrated her safe return, calling the previous rumors unfounded and malicious. The casual observer might have welcomed the reassurance. But those who had followed every twist in the story did not feel reassured. Something was off. It was not the flawless makeup or the meticulously styled hair. It was not her posture or her poise. It was the absence of something intangible, a certain softness in her expression, a familiar gentleness in her eyes that seemed to have vanished. Fans began placing her recent photos beside older ones, comparing them with clinical precision. They analyzed the arch of her nose, the curve of her cheekbone, the distance between the tip of her chin and the shadow beneath her lip. They examined screenshots of her ears, noting subtle variations in lobe position and cartilage structure. The differences were minute, but to some, undeniable. Perhaps the most debated of all was the absence of a tiny mole in the sclera of her left eye, a detail so delicate that only long-time admirers remembered it. In earlier close-ups, the mole appeared faintly beneath bright studio lights, a small imperfection that made her beauty feel real. In the new footage, it was gone. Makeup could hide many things, but not that. The debate turned fierce. Was it merely a trick of lighting, or was something far more deliberate at play? The thrum of suspicion reached a fever pitch during a live stream held in her honor, meant to comfort fans and quell rumors. The broadcast began smoothly, her face framed in soft lighting, filters smoothing her skin into porcelain clarity. She spoke with practiced ease, though her smile felt tight, stretched like silk pulled too thin. But as she shifted her posture, turning her head slightly downward, viewers noticed the shadow at her jawline, a faint line where the skin tone on her neck did not quite match the shade of her face. It could have been poor lighting. It could have been a glitch. Or it could have been something she was not meant to reveal. Then the sound broke through. A muffled crash. A voice. The unmistakable cry of a woman, sharp, desperate, filled with a terror that could not be faked. "Why are you hitting me? Why are you hitting me?" The voice faded as quickly as it appeared, swallowed by the microphone's digital crackle. But for the millions who heard it in real time, it was enough to turn the live stream from a celebration into a chilling spectacle. When the broadcast ended abruptly, it only deepened the unease. Replays spread online within minutes. Analysts of every kind, audio technicians, language experts, casual fans, slowed the clip, isolated the sound, compared frequencies. Some insisted it was background noise from a nearby room. Others argued the voice belonged unmistakably to the real Chen Duling. Theories spiraled wildly. fueled by fear rather than certainty. But the consensus that formed was the same one that had overwhelmed the public after Yu Menglong's disappearance. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and explanations felt dangerously insufficient. And just when the public thought the nightmare had reached its peak, a new name began to surface. A name far more influential, far more untouchable. Hu Ge had long been regarded as one of the rare stars who managed to survive fame without being consumed by it. His career spanned decades, yet he carried the same gentle charm that had first captured audiences during his early years. He was dignified, introspective, and respected, not only for his talent, but for the quiet strength that seemed to anchor him in an industry notorious for its turbulence. That was why the unease surrounding his recent public appearances felt so profoundly unsettling. If someone as steady as him could be shaken, the problem had to be much larger than the surface revealed. When the prediction surfaced, a vague, cryptic warning from a spiritual blogger overseas, claiming that a male superstar with the surname Hu was the next target of an unseen force, it should have faded as quickly as it appeared. But it did not. The timing aligned too closely with the growing terror surrounding Chen Duling. The tone of the message was too specific, too insistent. The entertainment world, still trembling from the chaos of the previous months, seized on the theory with the desperation of a collective mind searching for meaning. And almost immediately, the public turned its gaze toward Hu Ge. His next appearance would only intensify that focus. It was a promotional event, routine, polished, the kind of spectacle he had navigated effortlessly for years. But the man who stepped onto the stage that evening looked different from the Hu Ge fans had known. His features remained recognizable, yet the warmth in his expression had faded, replaced by something taut and restless. His eyes, once calm and steady, flickered nervously across the venue as though scanning for an unseen threat. Even the way he held the microphone, tight, tense, fingers pressed firmly against the metal, betrayed a tension he could not hide. Photographers caught moment after moment of him glancing over his shoulder, lips pressed in a thin line as if bracing for something he could neither predict nor prevent. Fans watching from home described feeling a chill, as though they were witnessing a man trying to hold himself together in front of an audience that had no idea what weighed on him. Then he appeared, the man in the white shirt. At first, viewers assumed he was a staff member or part of Hu Ge's security team. But the way he moved said otherwise. He lingered a step too close, closed in whenever Hu Ge shifted slightly off-center, and leaned in with the subtle firmness of someone issuing instructions rather than offering support. An earpiece glinted beneath his hair. His expression never changed, unreadable, cold. And every time he placed a hand on Hu Ge's shoulder or whispered something too quiet for cameras to catch, Hu Ge's posture stiffened, as though a string pulling him upward had suddenly been tightened. Clips of the man in white spread across social media within hours. Thousands of users replayed the footage, analyzing micro-expressions, body angles, distance between them. Was he a handler, a minder, a monitor? Theories blossomed, each more frightening than the last. In some frames, Hu Ge's eyes widened at the man's approach as though anticipating reprimand. In others, he seemed to shrink slightly, his shoulders subtly curling inward. The image of a man under watch, or worse, under control, took hold. But what haunted fans far more deeply was the transformation in his appearance. Hu Ge had always aged gracefully, but recently his complexion carried a pallor that no lighting could conceal. His once smooth jawline was darkened by overgrown facial hair, his cheeks slightly hollowed, giving him the look of someone who had not slept well for weeks, perhaps months. In candid photos, his skin appeared uneven, tinged with fatigue rather than makeup. The change was so abrupt that it sparked debates across platforms. Some argued that he was merely preparing for a new role. Others whispered a different explanation, that he was deliberately dimming his own radiance, shedding the aesthetic of a leading man, as though trying to make himself less visible, less desirable, less valuable. A resurfaced interview clip added fuel to the speculation. Years earlier, he had mentioned almost jokingly, "If I do not change my appearance, I may not survive in this industry." At the time, people interpreted it as commentary on artistic reinvention. Now replayed under the cloud of recent rumors, the sentence carried a more sinister weight. It sounded less like a playful remark and more like an omen. Online communities dug deeper, tracing back to the darkest chapter of his life, the devastating car accident of 2006. In the tragic crash, his assistant Zhang Mian lost her life, while he survived with severe injuries. It had been labeled an unfortunate accident, yet speculation resurfaced. What if the seating change that led to Zhang Mian's death had not been random? What if forces at play back then were resurfacing now? The idea was chilling, almost unthinkable. But the internet had already walked too far into its own labyrinth of fear to turn back. Then came the late-night posts. For months, Hu Ge's social media accounts had remained quiet. But on certain nights, in the silent hours before dawn, cryptic messages appeared. They were brief, tremulous, as though typed by a hand caught between courage and resignation. "I am sorry. I hope everyone will be kind to me. Forgive me." There was no context, no explanation, no follow-up. The posts vanished quickly, sometimes deleted within minutes. But screenshots circulated, preserved like fragments of a distress signal, intercepted from someone trapped beneath a collapsing structure. To many, the words sounded like a man apologizing not to the world, but to ghosts, to those who had fallen before him, to secrets he could not speak aloud, to choices he may have made or refused to make. It was the voice of someone caught between protecting others and surviving himself. As threads tied him back to Yu Menglong, a chilling mosaic formed. He had once defended the young actor publicly, offering rare support in an environment where silence was often safer. Support like that was not easily forgotten or forgiven by those who preferred compliance. Some believed that in standing up for others, he had inadvertently painted a target on his own back, drawing the same invisible forces toward him that had hovered so heavily over the fates of others. Interviews from his past were rewatched with new eyes. Lyrics from songs he once recommended were dissected for hidden meanings. Even his absence from certain events was reinterpreted as an act of survival rather than scheduling conflict. Every detail became evidence. Every change became a warning. And yet, beneath the fear, beneath the speculation, beneath the frantic search for meaning, one thing remained painfully clear. The more the public tried to understand what was happening around him, the less certain everything felt. The truth, if it existed, was buried behind layers of silence, guarded by shadows that refused to reveal their shape. And yet, despite all the noise, all the fear, and all the unanswered questions, one truth remains. The story is far from over. The stories of Yu Menglong, Chen Duling, and Hu Ge did not begin the same way, nor did they unfold along identical paths. Yet somewhere beneath their differences lay a shared thread, a quiet, persistent tension humming beneath the surface of their public lives, a sense that invisible pressures shaped their destinies far more than anyone outside the industry could fully comprehend. Their narratives, fragmented and uncertain, had merged into something larger, a tapestry woven from unanswered questions, whispered suspicions, and a widening gap between what the world was shown and what the world feared might be hiding in the shadows. As the months passed, the internet became an archive of unease. Forums grew into sprawling labyrinths of speculation. Screenshots, slowed-down videos, eyewitness accounts, spiritual visions, and meticulously analyzed photographs began to form a collective memory of the turmoil. Some pieces were based on instinct, others on rumor, and a few on glimpses of truth too fragile to last long before being erased. But together, they shaped a narrative that refused to die, no matter how many official statements or carefully curated appearances tried to smother it. What frightened people most was not the possibility of a single tragedy, but the pattern that seemed to stretch beyond individual cases. The signs were never clear enough to prove anything conclusively, yet never vague enough to dismiss entirely. A smile held a second too long. Eyes that darted toward dark corners. Live streams that echoed with sounds no broadcast should contain. Apologies posted at midnight, without context, without explanation. These fragments coated the entertainment world in an atmosphere of quiet dread, as if something enormous moved beneath the floorboards, unseen but unmistakably present. In another era, these stories might have faded into the noise. But now, in a world where digital traces never truly disappear, the public clung to every detail, unwilling to let any piece slip away. Some sought closure, others sought justice. Many simply tried to understand what their instincts already sensed, that the line dividing reality from rumor had grown so thin that even light struggled to pass through it. What remained undeniable was the emotional weight the narratives carried. People mourn not only the possibility of lives lost, but the fragility of the human spirit trapped behind curated perfection. They grieved for the stars who might have suffered in silence, for the voices that could no longer speak for themselves, for the haunting thought that power could bend truth until it broke. And in that collective grief, something shifted. The audience was no longer watching from afar. They had become participants, researchers, investigators, archivists of fear and empathy, trying to protect the fragments of truth that kept resurfacing despite every attempt to bury them. Perhaps the truth will one day reveal itself, unfiltered and undeniable. Perhaps it never will. But the impact of these stories, real or imagined, has already carved itself into the public consciousness. The questions left behind linger like the final notes of a requiem, echoing through conversations, through memories, through the cold spaces that silence cannot reach. And somewhere in that silence, the story waits, patient, unfinished, and still unfolding.